The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. So we were having some technical difficulty. I was having it. But that said, I just want to thank Juan for his kindness. He is always there. So appreciate you, Juan. And for those of you who have got our books, we appreciate you. Please be sure to get our books, because not only they're going to change your lives, you will be helping us help entrepreneurs change their lives, because part of the profits go towards kiva.org. And I can tell you, entrepreneurs are special, and so are you. So let's get started with today's show, and let's bring in our guest.
Good morning, Divya.
Good morning, Mitch. So we get started from, one of the earlier days in your life. Do you have, from your childhood or early youth, that you remember even now? It can be a moment, a person, an experience that left a positive mark on you.
Yeah, I actually do. And it turned out to be the most intelligent thing that anyone has ever said to me. I was a commercial real estate broker, and I had just started, and I had done a couple of successful transactions very, very quickly. And there was a secretary at the company that I was with. And, she was congratulating me, and I was being kind of, modest. And I said, I was just in the right place in the right time. And she got angry at me. And she actually said, "That's not it." And I was really taken aback. And she said, "That's not what's important. What's important is not being in the right place at the right time, but knowing you are." And it stuck with me. It just always stuck with me that opportunities pass all of us like a river all the time. And it's recognizing what opportunities are right for us, for who we are, and capitalize on those. And I apologize for kind of going on and on, but it really was, and still is, the most important, interesting thing that anyone's ever said to me.
Well, that is very profound and very true if you think about it. It's sort of counterintuitive, but at the same token, how can you be at the right place and at the right time unless you recognize that the opportunity is right for you? And that comes when you're in alignment with yourself.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Know yourself, know what you can do, and recognize that something is an opportunity. Yeah, it's pretty heady stuff.
It is. So tell us, you started out in real estate. So I'm assuming that was the first part of your career. And did you continue in real estate, or did your career take a turn?
Well, I've actually always been in real estate. As a kid, I recognized the power of real estate. I was always interested in architecture. I was actually one of the first real estate majors in the country. I went to the University of Colorado, and there were only a couple places in the whole country, universities, that offered a major in real estate. So I did. I was a major and got all that information. I moved to California, became a real estate broker, and then I became a developer. Not very long after, just after a couple of years as a commercial broker, I kind of felt I knew what I was doing. Like all young people, they think more highly of themselves than was probably appropriate. But I did it, and I've always been involved ever since in commercial real estate to where I've actually had lots of other business interests that have really taken pretty much my full-time energies, but always been involved in real estate, more in the background. And today I still own commercial real estate across many states in the US.
That's fantastic. So what made you stay with commercial real estate?
I've learned that if you're smart about the assets you buy, and that's true with any investment. If you are selective on what you buy and how you manage it, you can make pretty safe bets. And over the years, I've recognized that that the commercial real estate that I've been focused on has been actually a very, very safe investment. And it's, continued to go up as rents, increase every, when leases turn over every, 5 years or 10 years, keep getting more money. And I will say that one of the things that has worked really, really well for me and maybe of interest to your audience is I have no debt on my properties. And they did start with debt, most of them. But as we were able to pay off debt and get free of that, it became also very clear to me that there's incredible safety in that. That the economy is cyclical, real estate is cyclical. Most everything in life, and certainly in business, goes through cycles. And if those cycles are not going to hurt you, if you have a vacancy and all you have to cover, are some utilities and property taxes, you're probably going to survive. But if you also had debt service, you might lose your property, lose your investment. So that was one of the major keys for me in recognizing the safety and I guess the good business tactic of not having debt.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you talked about that how business and lives are cyclical. So going to the pandemic, since post-pandemic, there has been definitely an impact on commercial real estate because so many companies have gone fully remote because of the employees having that freedom to
Sure.
work from outside. And there are a lot of young employees who are traveling and working because they can work remote. And a lot of companies have come back as well, where they've created hybrid because they have recognized the value of having people in the office. That said, there's still a lot of properties that are becoming vacant. And I'm sure a lot of people will have this question that, Mitch, with all these changes going on, what advice can you give to someone if they were looking to invest in commercial real estate, and how would they go about it?
Well, there's a saying in golf: it's better to be lucky than good. And I have to say that I've been pretty lucky in keying in on a type of real estate that I have. I own virtually, all that I own are single tenant, triple net properties. So like stores, like freestanding stores, gas stations, things like that. So I haven't had the kind of exposure that you're talking about that is very, very real, very, very serious. And I've been very fortunate, probably more fortunate than smart, in having those kind of investments in my real estate portfolio. But I will say, in answer to your question, that it's important to be flexible, be creative. If you've got a property, if you have an office building that's got vacancies, well, what other use can you bring in? Can it be low-income housing? There's a big trend in that. of converting, empty ghost buildings into low-income housing, get people, who are homeless off the streets, and the local jurisdictions and the states and even the federal government are trying to find housing for people. Maybe that's an answer. There's all kinds of different things going on with office space. I've seen where they're actually using indoor farming, in commercial buildings to take up the space and have multi-tiered levels of farming, hydroponic farming. And it's, again, be creative, whatever works, whatever you can pull into a vacant space, you got to go for it.
That's very creative. And it's also about thinking outside the box. I know it's a cliche. And
well, I do badass solutions.
So going back to what you mentioned about single tenant, that is very, very smart, because if you think about it, no matter what, people cannot have haircut remotely. It's almost like I had read this joke somewhere that somebody has pain in the tooth, and the dentist is like showing in the joke. Of course, I'm really bad joke deliverer. That your tooth is fine. So there are some things which are never going to go out of business. So looking at single tenant, so that's really good. Now moving towards, as you grew in your career, you mentioned that you have other business interests as well. So what made you go for diversification?
Well, I think we already touched on this openness that I learned very, very long ago of being open to opportunities, and several different opportunities passed me by, in the course of my business life, that I said, oh, that's a really interesting opportunity. I like this. I'm going to pursue this. I could see this working. And I've created businesses around that realization of an opportunity. So, I know that that's a little nebulous in specifics. However, I've been able to see, like, let me give you an example. There's a very, very famous, well-known ticket brokerage in New York City. It's called TKTS, and they sell last-minute unsold seats for all the Broadway shows, and they're anywhere from 25 to 50% off. And every day at 3:00 before they open, there's a line down the street in the middle of Times Square for people to buy discounted show tickets. Fabulous. I stood there as a customer myself and like shocked at myself, that I was standing in line for an hour, to save, at that time was maybe $30 a ticket, $50 a ticket. And I just thought it was an amazing business model. And as my other business interests took me to Las Vegas, and I was involved in Las Vegas business market, and I got involved in sort of an aspect of ticketing, but I suddenly realized that amazing model from New York had never been done in Las Vegas. And I thought, that's bizarre. I mean, I'm not the only one who understands this. There has to be a reason that this business model of last minute show tickets has never been done in the show capital of the world is Las Vegas. How could it not have been done? So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, was there some law, some local mandate where the hotel's against it? There was no reason. It's just, honestly, nobody had ever done it. I'm not that much of a genius, but nobody had ever done it. Maybe that's the key here, is do it. And it wasn't easy, I have to say. I was very committed, and it took me 2 years just to get 12 shows of the then 60 shows to even try this. They thought I might ruin their business and all that kind of thing. And we opened the doors of our first location, and honestly, Divya, there was a line down the street, just like in New York, the first day. And And we became the largest ticket broker in Las Vegas and sold over $1 billion of show tickets and attractions and tours and dining reservations. Incredibly successful business. And that was part of a publicly traded company at the time that I founded. So, once again, it's recognize an opportunity and then, have the tenacity, be stubborn as hell and make it happen.
Yeah. That is really, really powerful. So now going to, a country has a lot of debt. And
Yes.
you have mentioned that there are solutions that we can, just work through it and it's gone. So tell us, how did you arrive at that and what are the solutions for that?
Well, I recognized that a couple years ago that I had solutions to some of our biggest problems. I'm kind of a news hound, and I'm really interested in current events and not politics as much as what's going on. And I recognize I really have some ideas on how to solve a lot of the biggest problems that we have. And I actually wrote down an outline of all these problems. And having no intention of writing a book, I finished this and I said, oh my gosh, this is a book. And I wrote it. And it became Badass Solutions, which is it's badass solutions for our big ass problems, of which there are 20 big problems that I recognize in the book. And one of them, and one that you and I talked about, is the huge debt that we have in the United States. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, I'm pretty much debt adverse. I don't have debt in my real estate. I don't think the country should have debt. So it's this massive problem where literally, we've had $34 trillion of debt. Well, this week it came out that now it's $35 trillion. And that debt is growing by another $1 trillion every 100 days. It's just, we're drowning. Our country is drowning in debt and its interest payments. So the incredible thing is that nobody's doing anything about it. These politicians have, complained and complained. Oh, we've got this problem. It's like running around with their hair on fire, but they don't say, well, here's how we're going to solve it. A couple times they say, well, let's raise taxes, or sometimes, oh, let's reduce spending. You're in a deep hole. And what are we going to do to get out of this? The exciting thing for me is we can actually get out of debt almost immediately. And if you'd like, I'd like to tell you how we can do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. When it's being kind of bantered around lately that, oh, the U.S. is bankrupt. We've got, $35 trillion in debt. We're bankrupt. But it's really very interesting. Let me pose a question to you and your audience, a couple questions that are, I think, kind of thought-provoking. And it's that if we're bankrupt, how can the United States have the strongest economy in the world? How's that possible? The next question to think about is, if we're bankrupt and we have so much debt, how can our debt instruments, the U.S. Treasury securities, be the safest investment in the world? It just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, it doesn't add up. It's almost like 2 + 2 = 5.
Exactly. It just doesn't make sense. But there's a really interesting answer that I think all of us feel inside ourselves. Oh, well, the U.S. is so strong, has so many assets, it could never default. Really? And we all kind of know this. And there's sort of proof of it. Every single week, the Federal Reserve auctions U.S. debt, U.S. Treasury notes, right? And billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars a week of U.S. debt is purchased by people from all over the world, individuals, corporations, even foreign countries, buy U.S. debt because it's so safe. Well, that's pretty profound. It's pretty interesting. But it led me to realize that the US has always considered that our assets are gold. The gold we have at Fort Knox. It was actually called the gold standard. The gold standard that the US used to be on, actually, it's an interesting concept. It actually allowed us to print paper money that was equal to the amount of gold reserves that we had at Fort Knox. So we had $100 of gold in Fort Knox. We can print a $100 bill, $100 paper money. And amazingly, early on, it was even possible for people, for American citizens, to take paper money and exchange it for actual gold. The gold standard was that. And we have, the US, if you look at it in any traditional accounting principles, the US has hundreds of times more assets than just its gold. The US has vast land reserves, oil reserves, untapped minerals, military installations, planes, huge ships, buildings, just massive, massive assets. And what's really fascinating is if we say that a country, US, can actually print paper money equal to its assets.
Mm.
Well, we've already done that for our whole history when we were on the gold standard, but we said our only asset was gold, but that's really not the case. And we internally and the whole world kind of knows, well, the country's good for it. The country's got assets, so I'll buy their debt. It's the safest investment in the world. Well, that's pretty fascinating. So what if we do something what I call the asset standard instead of the gold standard? Mm-hmm. And the asset standard is that the US has this massive reserve of assets, and we simply write checks, paper money, if you will, against those assets and pay off the debt. So everyone who's holding US treasuries gets a check. China has $1 trillion of our debt. We send China a check for $1 trillion,
Mm-hmm.
and a thank you note. Here's your $1 trillion back, China. Thanks very much. Enjoy. So the question becomes, will China cash the check, and will it clear? Yes, it will, both. So China and your Aunt Betty go and deposit their checks, and the check goes through the normal banking system all the way to the Federal Reserve, where it's drawn on the Federal Reserve Bank and it clears. How would it not clear? It will clear. So it's fascinating in its simplicity, but also thoroughness. We do not have to have debt. It's very interesting. Literally 100 years ago, Thomas Edison, probably the greatest thinker of the day, actually said that a country that issues a debt instrument, in this case, treasury notes, treasury bonds, and it's paper money, those two are the same thing because they're a promise to pay. So he was advocating 100 years ago, why would the US take on debt if it can also just pay it, print the money based on its assets? And he was right 100 years ago. And I think that still applies right now. It's really, really very interesting. However, I add a strong note of caution. This is doable. This is very doable. And I also think that we can fund additional things that we need in our country. We can, our Social Security is underfunded. fund it so that it's not vulnerable. Help public schools, fund great things that we need in our country once. Here's the caution. If we just keep having a Congress who we know will keep spending money, if they can write blank checks and they're going to clear, it will not stop. And at some point, it's a dangerous thing for the economy. Then it becomes, at a point, it becomes inflationary and ruins the value of the dollar. However, if we pay off the debt, fund things that we really have to take care of right now, and actually create a reserve. So reserve, like for the money we needed during COVID for a major crisis, we've got that set aside as a reserve. We don't have to go into debt again. We fund all those things right now with the asset standard. However, in my opinion, we can only use this magic wand once.
So you have to use it very carefully.
Very carefully. And I believe that to do it, we would have to pass, as strong as it gets, a constitutional amendment that requires the federal government to have a balanced budget. It cannot deficit spend. It can't borrow money. It can only be limited to spending the amount of money that it takes in, really from taxes. That's its revenue, and never have this problem again. But can you imagine how much this country and our population can thrive if the U.S. is out of debt and all of its important programs are funded? It'd be unheralded.
So to be transparent, Mitch, all of this is still sinking in, because
you know what? It's
this person. I'm more of a, I'm a visionary and all that. So it is still sinking in. So now let's take, like, you have tackled such a huge debt problem. Now let's come down to our audience level. A lot of people have debt, and they may have assets or they may not have assets. So what would you tell them? How could they get out of their debt with some out-of-the-box solutions?
Well, it's not quite the same as the assets of the United States of America.
Right.
in managing your own household. But I do believe that debt is a financial killer. Interestingly, that said, I think it's fine to have a mortgage. I think it's fine to buy a house with debt. There are, other benefits that go with buying a house that outweigh having debt. And, as long as you have income that can support that house payment, that mortgage payment, and all the other, home costs, I'm okay with having a mortgage. However, for everything else, I think you have to try very, very hard not to have debt. On your credit cards, pay them off every month. If you have credit card buildup in debt, get that paid off. Those companies, that have constant ads on the television or send you continually, how many requests do you get a week, for a new credit card? They want you to have debt. They want you to pay 25 or 30% interest. Well, you can't do that. You've got to pay off that credit card debt. That's the most expensive debt you can come across because of the interest payments. Pay them off. Don't keep buying things. Save your money. Pay those off as fast as you can. That's, I think, the first thing. And then, just try very, very hard to spend within your means. Don't overspend. And once you can come out of debt, once you can get credit cards paid off, once if you have other personal loans and things like that, struggle, spend less money on your own expenses, and try as hard as you can to get those paid off, and your life will turn around. You will flourish economically. It's so critical that you save money, that you invest money. This country has unbelievable opportunities for investors. And if you can get to that point that you're investing and compound that income, meaning the money that you bring in from your investments, make that invested too. Let that keep growing. And there's an interesting little tidbit that I just love. It's called I'm not sure if I coined this or if it already exists, Divya. Is it? I call it the 7-10 rule. And if you get 7% interest and you let it compound, your principal will double in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you flip-flop that and say you get 10% interest on your investments, your principal, your initial investment, will double in 7 years. So you can see that if you can achieve let's say a 10% interest and keep investing the income from it, every 7 years, you'll have double the amount you invested originally. It's an amazing thing. And the government lets you do that in retirement accounts. So it's an incredibly valuable tool. And get out of debt and start investing, and you will become wealthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, some really great nuggets out there. So tell us what prompted you to write your book. I know you shared that you just happened into it. You went and did the outline, but how did you kind of continue on that road, and what other solutions are captured in your book?
Well, there was a family tragedy almost exactly 2 years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. My brother-in-law's brother was killed by a young man with an assault rifle 2 years ago at a 4th of July parade near his home in Highland Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. And 7 people were killed by this, unfortunately, demented young man with assault rifles. But one of them was my brother-in-law's brother, who was just this great, wonderful guy. I mean, everybody respected him. Everybody loved him. He was just the nicest guy you've ever met. And it hurt. It hurt everybody in the family.
I mean, really sorry for your loss, especially when it's so unexpected.
Yeah, thanks. It was hard. It was hard on the family, and I was angry. How does this happen? I'm really angry about it. And I decided that, okay, it's one thing to be angry. It's another thing, do something about it, and that's what really prompted me to recognize what I said a little earlier, that I do have solutions to some of our biggest problems. And that's what prompted me to sit down and do this outline. And then it became the book, Badass Solutions. And it's, I have to say, it only came out last month, but it's been getting, very, very positive responses and reviews. It already hit #1 new release on Amazon.
Congratulations.
Thanks. But people are seeing that there's some provocative, interesting ideas to some of our biggest problems, like what we just talked about, paying off the U.S. debt. That's not something that's being talked about, on television every day. This is something unusual. And you can say, oh my gosh, well, that could work. And that really, I think, is kind of the theme of Badass Solutions. This could work. And, and I tackle, an awful lot of topics, like how to make the public schools better than private schools, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. stock market. I actually call it close the casino. Healthcare, homelessness, immigration, assault rifles. So I have, as I said, 20 topics that are, I think, our biggest problems today. And, I came up with solutions for taking care of them. So it's an interesting read. I think there's some fun in it. I have quotes from mostly famous people at the beginning of each chapter that are relevant to that topic, that are, both thought-provoking and kind of funny. So, it's a fun read. It's easy. I'm not an academic. I'm just just a guy out there who has a lot of background in problem solving. And I think that, that's something to touch on, that, I'm not just some, guy who said, oh, I'll work on this. My background in business is pretty extensive. For 40 years, I've created and been CEO of publicly traded companies, of private companies. I've developed, as we talked about, commercial real estate, and still own and operate commercial real estate throughout the country. And in doing that, I guess, as with any, successful, good business person, you have to develop really good problem-solving skills, because problems are thrown in the way of a business person. Every step you take, there's some reason that you can't take the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. And I would hope your audience gets some comfort in knowing they're not alone in realizing that, you've got to overcome obstacles. You've got to think. You've got to be a problem solver. And along with problem solving, you've got to be tenacious. You cannot give up. You've got this dream, and some roadblock comes your way. Get over it, around it, through it, whatever it takes to succeed, reach your goal. Anyway, I developed, I think, very high level problem solving skills. And I found that addressing or using those problem solving skills didn't apply just to business. They applied to these big national and global problems. And I was able to develop what, I'm getting a lot of feedback are, pretty cool ideas that could, go a long way to, I don't want to sound pompous, but change the world. However, I was very fortunate that Jack Canfield, who co-wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, he's actually the number one most successful author of nonfiction books in history. He's sold over 600 million books. The guy is unbelievable. He's just brilliant. Oh, yeah. Brilliant. And his books are fantastic. He's had 47 New York Times bestsellers. Anyway, I was very fortunate that he read a copy of my book before it was published. And he was very, very complimentary, and actually sent over the foreword for the book. So, it gave, this guy from seemingly nowhere some credibility here, that someone of Jack Canfield's stature said, effectively, look, if we get attached to one or more of Mitch's solutions that touches your soul and get other people interested, we have a chance of changing the world.
And why not?
Why not?
Absolutely.
So well, I was lucky, and we'll see where this goes.
So thank you for all the nuggets and the wisdom you have shared. Where can people find you, and where can they find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. You can search on Amazon for Badass Solutions, or under Mitch Francis. And either one will get you there. It's also on Barnes and Noble, all the other normal places to buy books online, particularly. But Amazon is probably the fastest, easiest for paperback or Kindle books. So it's been a pleasure, Divya. Thank you. You're a terrific interviewer. I never know that I can even say anything you haven't, and I haven't shut up, but but thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Mitch, for joining us and sharing your insights, because insights is what takes us to implementation.
That's a good one.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you, audience, because without you, the show would not be possible. You are amazing, and we are here to serve and support you. Reach out to us. Let us know how else can we help you, because we want you to thrive. We want you to live the life you deserve and you want. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well and take care until next time.
Thanks.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who've experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.